It's my pleasure to be joined by Tricia Sandiego from AARP today. A lot of our community will know about the HTech Collaborative, who we partnered with for a recent pitch competition. But Tricia, you're new to HITLAB in terms of being on the program, so it's lovely to have you on. We'd love to hear a little bit about yourself. So if you give us a 2-minute background on yourself, I'm sure the audience would love to hear about what you've done and what you do currently at AARP.
Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to this session. I'm Tricia Sandiego. I work on AARP's Community, State, and National Program Department within the Family Caregiving and Health team. And what we do there is we, equip family caregivers with the resources that they need to help provide care for a loved one. And what I do is mostly focused on health education, health promotion, health communication. My background is mostly in public health, over 20 years in various industries and backgrounds. But I always go back to, the social mission of helping individuals and communities with their health. And we know that family caregivers, which I'll take a step back and sort of define who that is, someone who's caring for a loved one at home, not sort of for your paid job or your daytime job, but someone who is taking care of a spouse, a neighbor, a family member, a relative, an aging parent. There's 53 million family caregivers in the US, according to AARP's Caregiving 2020 data. And we know that number has increased since the pandemic, of which we know about 48 million are caring for older loved ones and adults. And so we really want to help family caregivers who are the backbone of our long-term care system.
That's really wonderful, Tricia. Thanks so much, and thanks for giving us some of those stats that I wasn't really aware of. And it certainly makes sense, especially with the aging population of not only the US but of the world, that we would start to sort of increase the number of caregivers that we need for the population and stuff. To that end, we often, when we hear about AARP, we don't normally think about the caregiving side of the equation. We focus more on the actual folks who are aging, but we'd love to hear about the work that you do around understanding the physical and mental impact, especially on women, with it being Women's Health Month. Who are those caregivers, especially caring for for the aging populations you spoke?
Sure. Yeah. Well, happy Women's Health Month. It's also Older Americans Month in May, and also Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month as well. So whatever you're celebrating this month, I think it is an important time to recognize family caregivers, especially women. AARP's mission is to empower people to choose how they live as they age, and you're aging at any age. And so caregivers who are sort of an exception to our normal target audience in the sense that they are not just the 50+ population. Caregivers come from every generation, from every walk of life, multicultural backgrounds. There's all different types of caregivers. So every caregiving journey is different. And if you've met one caregiver, you've met one caregiver, because all the different sort of permutations of the disease condition that they may be helping assist a loved one with, who the loved one is in terms of their relationship. Are they long distance? Are they close? And so there are a lot of family caregivers in the US who need help, and they're all different types. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to help caregivers, but I think we can really help provide the framework. But there certainly is a disproportionate impact of caregiving challenges on women. Women do tend to are more likely to be caregivers than men. 6 in 10 tend to be women. Demographics are changing, though. We see more and more men in the caregiving role. They're, as like I mentioned, diverse as they come, and all types of generations. We have actually more than 50% of the family caregivers are actually younger than the age of 50. So this isn't just an older, person, an issue for people in their 50s or 60s. 25% are millennials, and even as young as Gen Z, we see 6% sort of stepping up into that role. And so we have a lot of different demographic stats to share, but we know that women tend to kind of take on that burden a little bit more, and the challenges. There's certainly rewards and joys to caregiving, but we know the mental load, the physical toll can take a big impact, because many women will report higher stress rates when they are in a caregiving role. I'm someone who identifies in the sandwich generation of caregiving. I'm taking care of multiple generations, my young children as well as my aging parents. And I actually call it the panini generation, because it's not just a regular sandwich, like you're really squished. And if you're also managing a full-time job or a daytime job on top of that, you're doing two jobs, one most likely paid, and then the other maybe secret. Maybe your workplace doesn't know, but that's most likely to be unpaid. So all that stress can lead to both physical impacts as well as mental and social emotional impacts that can be detrimental to a woman's health. We have things like insomnia, anxiety, depression, weight gain, weight loss, just the inability to sort of be able to balance all the things that you're juggling up in the air is a lot to handle at once, and it does take that physical toll. Women will tend to delay any kind of preventive screenings or usual annual checkups of their own health care while they're caring for a loved one, and that can have impacts in terms of not really taking advantage of the benefits of primary and secondary prevention. You have less time to exercise potentially. You have less time for yourself to plan to eat right and do all those kinds of things. So there certainly is that physical and mental and socio-emotional health impacts. We know people tend to feel more lonely and isolated when they're caregivers, because they're oftentimes just putting it all on their own shoulders.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You bring up some really, really good points, about all the different things that can really impact any caregivers, and no less, of course, the women that we want to sort of focus this specific conversation on, and the fact that you are juggling all of these different priorities in your life, as well as having to care for a loved one too. Could you speak a little bit more on that in terms of how women can prioritize both their mental and their physical health, as well as the health of the person that they're caring for, among all these other priorities that they have to juggle?
Absolutely. I think the first step is to give yourself grace. I think we take on a lot as women in the household and in your own sort of family circle, as well as in the workplace. And I think you need to give yourself grace and take a step back and assess your own self-care needs. There's feelings of guilt. There's a lot of high emotional state that's happening sometimes when you're thrown into a caregiving situation, and you usually just sort of need to take a step back and get your bearings. I think one of the first things that you can do is preparedness and making a plan. That's self-care in lots of ways. It's not your typical sort of spa day or meditation or yoga or walk in the park, which are all great things to do for yourself that don't take a lot of time. But I think making a plan for your caregiving role and your situation, and even a plan for yourself, so that you don't perpetuate sort of the cycle of unpreparedness and pass it on to the next generation for who's caring for you when you become a care recipient. I think that's one thing that you can really do to feel more self-efficacy, more sort of confidence in the caregiving role, and help you build that capacity to be able to juggle when you know that there's something that you can refer to in terms of steps. And AARP has lots of resources in terms of making that plan, regardless of where you are in your caregiving journey. You can be not a caregiver yet and in true preparedness mode, or you can be in the throes of caregiving and still need that time to take a beat, take a step back and get your bearings. What are things that you need to improve and work on? So I think planning is really critical. I think giving yourself grace, of course, allowing yourself time to do things for yourself, like your health checkups, like your annual preventive screenings. If something is bothering you health-wise, make sure to go check it out. And seeking counseling or therapy, if that's something that you can access. Certainly having someone to talk to describe your situations, to manage some of the maybe difficult relationships that you might have while you're balancing caregiving and all the other balls that you have in the air. I think those are really, really good things that you can focus on. Just remember the sort of airplane oxygen mask analogy. They always say, put that oxygen mask on yourself before you do put it on others, because you're not really that helpful if you're not sort of giving your all, if you're not sort of able to give your all to yourself first before you help others.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And some virtual round of applause from the audience there in terms of that specific analogy. Some really, really great advice as well to just shy of 170 or so folks that are currently watching and listening live, to which I'm sure a really good proportion of them it really, really does apply to and resonate with. But just as we round off here, before we go on to the next segment, Tricia, and thank you so much for your time. Are there any specific resources? I know you spoke about therapy just now, and things to kind of have caregivers get things off their chest and talk things through. Are there any other resources out there, especially with with things that AARP maybe is able to offer, that is out there for women in this current situation?
Of course, we have tons of articles and support on aarp.org/caregiving. I encourage everyone to go there. But look at your social network. Who are the other caregivers? They're oftentimes sort of the number one resource that caregivers can turn to and provide support. There's probably local support groups in your organization. Look at nonprofit disease management groups to see what they have available. I think we saw something come up in the chat for that. And look at your employer. If you're a working family caregiver, your employer likely has benefits to support you, to help you balance your job as well as caregiving. And they're often underutilized and people don't know their caregiving applicability, but certainly leverage all the things that are at your fingertips and don't try to take it all on your own. Give yourself grace. Delegation is really key. And that ability to, take a beat and get your bearings and, do the best that you can, but just make sure that you prioritize yourself.